Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Kaiju Cosplay DIY. I apologize if my video is shaky. I lost my tripod because I'm awesome. For today's episode, I'm going to show you guys how to make a Kamen Rider style eye. Or really just any kind of insectoid eye that you can use for like Mothra or whatever insect you want to do. But do be aware that this is a very costly project. Just to cast the eyes that I'm using for the Kamen Rider suit that I'm doing cost me I think either just under or just over $100, and that's just for eyes. So yeah, it's like I said, it's a very costly project, but the overall look and quality of the eyes kind of justifies the means. Now, the first thing that I did was I sculpted the basic frame out of Sculpey, and after I had baked it and sanded it smooth, I then got some of this stuff. I highly suggest you use this mold making compound. It's just silicone, but it picks up on like the most minute details, and I can't recommend this stuff enough. But move you guys out of the way, and then I poured this. Now, after I got this sanded and everything, I built a clay frame around it so that I could pour the silicone into the frame and make that. If that helps you guys out any. Now, after I had this poured, since the Kamen Rider eye is smooth on the outside but textured on the inside, I needed to do the texturing. So, I put clay inside here, about a ½ inch thick, about 3/4 of an inch, if I remember correctly. And then after this was filled in with clay, I then punched in, all that texture work with a pencil that I have shaped into kind of a weird, I don't know how well it'll pick up, like a diamondy, triangular kind of shape. I really don't know what that's called. But after all the clay was in here, I just went along and punched in the different shapes. And that process took me like a day. Because clay is finicky and it'll mess up, and whenever it messes up, you got to go in and redo it. A lot of that. So, after I had that made, then I put some mold release compound, which would be this stuff, and a bit of advice. Use a lot of this, because the first time I did it, I just brushed on a little bit because I didn't know how effective this stuff was. Turns out I should have used a lot more. But, after I poured silicone into that half, then I got this piece. And then, of course, remove the clay, wash it up and everything. And then you just, put the two molds together, rubber band it. That's what these miscolored, lines are, is from the rubber bands. And then I just poured resin down into this channel. Now, you'll note that there are two different channels. And the reason for that is that I needed this channel to actually pour the resin down into, and then this channel was for the air and overflow to come out of. Because the resin is going to have air bubbles, and having an extra channel for the air bubbles, I can't talk today, to come out of is highly recommended. Now, I also cut these other channels into this one for better coverage of the eye. But whenever you mix together your resin, and I use this stuff, I don't know if this is the best resin to use for this, but it's the only one that I had available, and I needed it to be transparent so that it would, pick up the inner texturing. Because if I use a completely solid resin, you wouldn't be able to see through it, and for something like this, you definitely need to see through it. But then, of course, you need to dye the eye. Now, I needed this to be pink because I wanted to go with the original Ichigo eyes. And so I had to get red and white because they don't make just a plain pink dye. And because the white is super thick, I had to mix this 5 drops of red to 1 drop of white. And then after I had that all mixed together, then I just put in 2 drops, it's 3 drops of the pink into the resin. Now, the resin comes in 2 parts, a hardener and Yeah, just the resin. But you got to pour this into 2 different cup or containers, like such, and because this is fine, you can just pour this into its own container and leave it sitting there. But this resin needs to be stirred before you actually mix them together. And after you've like stirred this before you like pour it into the hardener, that's when you want to add your dyes. And of course, after that point, like I said, just pour it in here, and then 3 days later, because this stuff takes forever to dry, just demold your eyeball and you've got an eye lens. Now this, and it could just be the resin that I used, but this is still pliable. A little bit. It's solid, but if you like squeeze on it hard enough, it'll like deform. I made this a little over a month ago, I think, and it still has some play. Not as much as it did before, so I think over time it'll actually be just a solid lens. But do be aware that for a while there is going to be a little bit of play, so be careful handling it, and you might want to let it sit for like a week or two before you actually start trying to add this to whatever you're adding it to. Well, that is it for this video of the Kaiju Cosplay DIY series, and until the next video, I bid you guys adieu, and may you have a very blessed evening. See ya!